Second Empire homes were some of the most distinctive and ambitious homes ever built in America. Tall, grand, and with their unmistakable dramatic roofline, they were built at a time where American cities were booming and architecture was evolving fast. They're part of a broader Victorian era of architecture that embraced bold designs, ornamentation, and a growing fascination with European styles. But unlike other British-inspired Victorian styles, such as the Queen Anne, Second Empire had French roots. So it was distinctively different, more urban, and it had very much a more formal feel than the other Victorian era styles. In this episode on Homes Explained, we're going to be looking at the fascinating history of Second Empire architectural style, breaking down its most recognisable exterior as well as interior features, and looking how the influence waned as other architectural styles came into fashion. The story of the Second Empire starts in mid-19th century France during the reign of Napoleon III, which ran from 1852 to 1870. And this period saw the complete transformation of Paris, where medieval neighbourhoods were completely cleared to make way for grand boulevards, monumental public buildings, and stylish residential blocks. And the signature feature of this newly built Paris was the Mansard roof. Now, this was named after a 17th century architect, French architect called Francois Mansard. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this was a really clever design because at the time, buildings were taxed according to how many visual stories you could see under the roof line. And the Mansard roof allowed you to have an additional full story under the roof line without it being visible from the exterior because it was all roof. After the American Civil War, the US was eager to project an image of modernity and sophistication, and the Second Empire style, fresh from Paris and all its associations of elegance and progress, offered just that. Cities such as New York, Boston, and St. Louis, which were all rapidly expanding, really embraced this architectural style for both public as well as private buildings. And beyond its stylishness, the Second Empire was really favoured as well for urban growth. Because of its vertical emphasis, the builders were able to squeeze quite a few on to narrow lots while still looking impressive and stylish. Now that we've explored the history of the home, let's take a look at the features on the outside which make it so distinctive. The Mansard roof is the most defining exterior feature. So this is a dual pitch roof which had a shallow upper slope and then quite a steep second slope to the roof. Now this not only added a full story to the house, but it gave the home a sense of height and grandeur that was really unmistakable and hard to miss. Often the roofs were finished with slate tiles, which even added to the elegance. And in some high-end Second Empire homes, you may also see iron cresting along the roof ridge, which is another nod to the French roots of this roof. The second exterior feature of Second Empire homes almost goes hand in hand with the first, and that's the decorative dormer windows. So these were usually framed with heavy mouldings, arches, pedimented tops, and even ornamental carvings. These dormer windows brought in a lot of natural light to the attic level rooms, and they added to the home's dramatic silhouette. The ornate design of these dormer windows also helped break up the look of the house from the exterior because of the depth of the roof line. These really pretty ornate dormers kind of stopped it visually from looking too heavy or plain. Exterior feature number 3 were the bold cornices and brackets. So at the junction where the roof line meets the exterior walls, these heavily bracketed cornices added a lot of ornamentation and detail. They were often oversized and arranged in pairs or a pattern around the roof line, giving it a really bold and sculptural quality. Feature number 4 were the tall, narrow windows. Now, if you watch the Italianate video, you'll see they had the same features. This is very much a European feature. So just like with the Italianate windows, the Second Empire windows had decorative, ornate hoods and surround, really adding depth and decorative interest to the flat facade. The tall windows also helped flood the home with natural light and reinforced the home's overall sense of verticality. And in the more elaborate Second Empire homes, usually in the more urban settings, sometimes these tall windows on the secondary floors would open up onto small wrought iron balconies, another decorative flourish borrowed from the French. Feature number 5 was the shape of the building. Second Empire homes were typically very boxy, very vertical and symmetrical. They had a very symmetrical fenestration, so the arrangement of all the windows when looking at it from the outside, and it had a centered entryway. Some of the grander homes also took this one step further by adding a central tower or a cupola, making the home seem even taller and more imposing. And the final feature was the coining and decorative stonework. So this was the use of stone blocks or raised brickwork, specifically at the corners of the building. So these coins not only gave the structure kind of strength and stability, but they also added an element of elegance and formality to the home's design. You might also see the decorative stonework along doorways, arches, and along the foundation, which added a visual contrast between the brick or the stucco walls, and this further emphasized the architectural style's urban sophistication. Of course, the drama of the Second Empire homes doesn't stop at the front door. Inside, these homes were designed to impress just as much as their exterior facades, with grand proportions, rich materials, and carefully detailed craftsmanship, which reflected the prosperity and wealth of the homeowners. The first interior feature were the high ceilings and formal rooms. So the first and second floors of the Second Empire homes typically had soaring ceilings around 10 to 12 feet, which really emphasized a sense of spaciousness. But the rooms were also very formal. There were parlor rooms, dining rooms, and libraries, each with their own distinct and often lavishly decorated space. This rigid separation of all the rooms reflected the era's emphasis on etiquette, privacy, and social formality, and there were lots of rules in terms of who could go in which rooms and when. The second interior feature were the elaborate woodwork and mouldings. Now, this is something the Second Empire has in common with the other Victorian era architectural styles, such as the Italianate and the Queen Anne. So interior trim was anything but plain. There was very heavy crown moulding, ceiling medallions, staircase newel posts, intricately carved, and marble fireplace surrounds. Craftsmanship was a real point of pride, and many builders used these intricate details to really display their skill, as well as showcasing the homeowner's wealth and status. The third interior feature is the attic level living space, and this is unique to the Second Empire home thanks to that really deep mansard roof and the ornate dormer windows. So Second Empire homes often had a full livable level in that mansard roof at the attic level, which was originally designed as servants' quarters or as storage, but today we often see that space converted into bedrooms, offices, or studio sections. And obviously, because of the kind of sloping ceilings and the attic space, it has a real cozy storybook feel. The fourth interior features were the arched windows and doorways. So arches were a subtle nod to classical design and softened the formality of the formal square rooms. Interior doorways, particularly at the front portion of the house where you had the parlour rooms, the dining room, the library, the very formal rooms where guests and visitors were entertained, these doorways were softened with arches, which really lent a feeling of flow and elegance to the home. And finally, the grand staircase. This was dramatic and sweeping and curved and served as a major interior showpiece. It wasn't just functional, it was designed to impress, greeting visitors with a dramatic ascent to the private upper floors. It was typically located right in the centre of the home in full view of the front door, and it symbolised the idea of social ascent, both literally and figuratively. By the 1880s, architectural tastes in America had shifted dramatically. Homeowners and builders were moving away from the very formal, symmetrical styles of the previous decades towards the more relaxed and whimsical design of the Queen Anne movement. But why did the Second Empire fall out of favour? Well, firstly, was the style's strong association with European grandeur, in particularly French imperialism, that started to feel out of step with a growing sense of American identity. America was industrializing rapidly, cities were booming, and many Americans wanted something that felt new, fresh, creative, and uniquely their own, not something borrowed from Paris, France. Secondly, people wanted homes that felt more organic and cozy, not stiff and formal. And the tall, boxy, vertical structure of the Second Empire started to feel quite outdated when compared to the sprawling floor plans, turrets, and playful design of the Queen Anne. There were also practical issues to consider. The very elaborate, though beautiful, Mansard roof was expensive to maintain. The dual-pitched roof, as well as the dormer windows, meant that water leakage was a common problem. So over time, this took a lot of time and money to maintain this. And this didn't align well with America's growing middle class's desire for less home maintenance and more informal homes. Today, Second Empire homes are beloved survivors of a very bold and optimistic architectural era. They stand out immediately with their iconic roof lines, ornate details, and unmistakable presence. While their time at the forefront of American architecture was relatively short-lived, they're still seen today, especially in civic architecture and historic preservation efforts. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Second Empire. Please like and subscribe. It lets me know it's worth me continuing doing these videos, and I'll now be switching to once a week because they're taking so long. Thanks, and see you next time.